Power BI Dashboard in a Day, the complete course. This is a complete course where the entire link to all of the manuals will be in the description below. We start off with importing data, then some data transformations, some Power Query transformations, then we load the data into Power BI and complete a report, and then we publish to the Power BI service. It's all part of Dashboard in a Day put out by Microsoft. The link will be in the description below. Let's go to Power BI and work on Dashboard in a Day. The best way to learn Power BI is to get inside the Power BI desktop version and start to experiment and start to use real data in Power BI. We are going to be doing a Dashboard in a Day, which is found online. If you search Dashboard in a Day, you will see the popular Microsoft version that allows you to download data, work with data, and create a dashboard. And it's designed to be completed in 3 to 4 hours in a classroom setting. So we're going to do it online and digitally. You can follow along. And again, if you want to search for the files, just search Dashboard in a Day, and that will bring you to the Microsoft website. Now, in this lab, there are 5 labs, and in today we are going to start off with Lab 1, which Lab 1 talks about preparing and loading data. And then we're going to add some data in this section, and we're going to be adding some CSV data and some Excel data. So the first thing you want to do is go inside Power BI, and we are going to add a CSV file. The CSV file is under Get Data, and there's over 300 data sources inside Power BI that you can connect to. And the first one we are going to connect to load into the Power Query editor is a text CSV file. And that text CSV file is going to be called sales. And that is the name of the file. So we are going to open that. At this point, the Power Query editor shows up, and you will see the different columns. We have product ID, we have date, we have zip, we have units, and we have revenue. And if you have never used Power Query, we're going to learn more about Power Query, but this will load the data. So the first thing we are going to do is you always want to take a look at your data before you load it, unless you know it's absolutely perfect. A lot of the data analysis job is transforming that data. We are going to select Transform Data, and that will bring up the Power Query editor. At this point, we have product ID, date, zip, units, and revenue. And if you noticed on the right-hand side, it changed the type. The next thing, the only data transformation we're going to make in this first section is this zip code, which is a zip code. They have loaded it as a default of a whole number, which is what the 123 symbol is. We are going to change that zip code to a text. And then it's going to ask you to replace the current step or add a new step. And we are going to replace the current step. And now we have zip as a text type of file. So that is our first data source. We have loaded a sales file, and we have updated the type of data to a text for the zip code. So the next thing we're going to do is add some more data sources. The power of Power BI is that you can add multiple tables into a report. So on the home screen, we are going to select the new source. And this next source is going to be our dimension tables. And dimension tables, we'll talk more about that. You have fact tables in Power BI, and you have dimension tables. And you want to have them look up the fact table to the dimension table. So when we select the dimension table, we're going to see in the navigator screen that we have some different options. We have a product table, a geography table, a manufacturer table, and a product table. So the ones that we want to load into the file, by checking the box, we will load in the product table. We see all of the different items in the product table. Then we will load in the geo table, and then we will load in the manufacturer table. So we can bring in 3 data sources all at once. So at this time, we are going to click the OK button. Now we have a series of tables on the left-hand side. We have the sales table, then we just loaded the product table, the geo table, and the manufacturer table. We're going to add another source. So we're going to go back up to the new source under the home menu. And this time around, we are going to add file from a folder. You can grab data from a folder to grab multiple files if they have the same format. So under the new source, we're going to select more. That brings up all of our options. And we are going to select folder. We will connect to the folder table. And now we want to find the folder path that if you downloaded the files, you will get a chance to choose those files. So we have a folder called International Sales, and we will select that folder as our source of the files for the international sales. We have multiple countries with sales, and by selecting a folder, you'll notice that you have a couple of options here. You have a combine and transform or transform. So we are going to select the combine and transform data option. That is going to evaluate the query, and now we are going to bring up our combined files. And this is based on the first 200 rows for the data detection. And your sample file, you notice you have Australia, Canada, Germany, Japan, Mexico, and Nigeria. So we're going to base it on the first file, and it's an alphabetical, so it's going to be Australia. So we are going to select the OK button. Now we have our Power Query. We have international sales, we have manufacturer, we have geo, we have product table, and we have sales. So now we are going to make just one transformation. In order to connect these files, we want to connect the same types of data. So the zip column, which is a zip code, we are going to change that to a text file. And you'll see why we're going to do that. And then we want to replace the current step. So we've loaded the international sales folder into a query, and we're going to change that to a text. And when you hit OK, this now changes to the ABC, which is a text file. So now we have 5 queries: sales, product table, geo, manufacturer, and international sales. So you're going to notice a couple of things. We have the source name, which is the source of the file inside the folder. And then you have a country code. And if you were to scroll for the country code, not all of the countries are listed. So if you load more, that will bring up the rest of the countries. And it takes a few seconds to load. And now we have all of the different countries showing, which is Australia, Canada, Germany, Japan, Mexico, and Nigeria. So now that we've done that, we do not need the source name column. So from the source name, we can go to the home menu and click Remove Columns. So that will remove the source name column. So now we are left in international sales with product ID, date, zip, units, revenue, and country. And so we have now loaded the data, and we've made a couple of transformations of the data in Lab 1, which is loading and accessing data. So the next step in our video. In Lab 1, Part 2 will focus in on the data preparation. This is Part 1 of Dashboard in a Day 2023. In Part 2, we will go to data preparation in Power BI. Back in Power BI, and we are continuing along with our Dashboard in a Day 2023. If you have not watched Part 1, look for that at the link above. You can click the link above or also look on this channel. But Dashboard in a Day is a chance for you to learn Power BI step by step, and we're going through the 2023 edition. In the first step, we loaded the data. We loaded a CSV, we loaded a Excel, and we loaded a third type of source, files from a folder. So now we're going to continue along Part 2. And now at this point, we're going to start doing some of the data preparation. So the first thing we're going to want to do, this code at the top is called your MCode inside each of these tables. And the steps of those MCode are on the right-hand side. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this transform files and close this folder so that we have the other queries. So we have currently 5 queries: sales, product table, geo, manufacturer, and international sales. So the first one is sales. And if you look at the steps involved in the process, we've got the source, promoted headers, and change type. So the next step is to now start naming the table. So we're going to change product table, and we're going to rename that product. And we're going to rename the geo table to geography. Then we have manufacturer. We're just going to make a quick change and capitalize that. And then we have international sales. And all we're going to do to this one is just add the space between international and sales. So that is renaming tables. And that is going to still keep us at 5. And so now we're going to fill some of the empty values. So if you go to the product table, you'll notice we have, in the category table, we have these nulls. And we have mix for the top one. So what we're going to do is, with the product table, and we are going to select the category column, the next thing we're going to do is, from the transform menu, we want to fill down. So we're going to take that mix, and it's going to fill that all the way down. And you see now in the category, everything has been changed to mix by filling that down. So we're going to stay in the product table. And the next thing we're going to try is splitting columns. Now remember, we're in the Power Query Editor, and we're making, what we're doing is we're doing our data preparation. We're getting everything ready so we can start to make some formulas, and then eventually down the road, we are going to do some data visualizations. So what we want to do now is, from the product column, you notice we have these products, and they are separated by a couple of different things. They have this bar in the middle that separates the product from the type, which is all season. So if you go to split column, and underneath the transform table, we are going to split by the delimiter. So the delimiter that we're going to split by is going to be the pipe symbol. And the pipe symbol is on your keyboard, and that is the pipe symbol. And when we hit OK on that, we are going to split by that pipe. So now we have product 2, which has all season, and we have product 1. So now we're going to rename the columns. So the product 1, we're going to just delete the period dot one and name that product. And then for the product 2, we're going to double click and name that segment. So now we have a product table, we have a segment column, and we're still doing all of this in the product. So again, we're preparing the data. And if you notice on the right-hand side, those applied steps get added to the changes on this query. So we're still in the product, we change the type, then we rename the columns. So now we're going to use a feature called Use Column from Examples to change the columns. So we're still going to stay in the product table. And what we're going to do is we are going to go to the price table, and we are first going to add a column. So you've got transform the current column, and then you've got adding columns. So we're going to make sure that our product query is selected. Then we're going to go to the add columns, and then we're going to go to this choose column from examples. And we're going to go from selection. The other option you have is from all columns. So we're going to go from selection. So now we're going to do some columns from examples. So if you type, we have price column selected, and we want to pull out that $412.13. If you noticed, all of the text after that delimiter now pulls that price out. And this is called adding columns from examples. And what we're going to do now is change the name to MSRP. And then we're going to hit OK. So now we've created a new column by adding a column and a column from example, and we've added the MSRP. So right now that's set up as a text column. This ABC is a text, and if you click on that little icon, we can now change that, and we're going to change that to a fixed decimal number to reflect dollars. So now that changed to the symbol, dollar symbol, and it's right justified on, and then we've changed the type too. So now we've added a column from example, we've renamed that column, and then we added the change type to add to a fixed decimal. So we're going to create the currency column in the same way. So now the next thing we're going to do, from all columns, we created our first column from example, and we're going to make our second one. And this time around, we're going to select the price category, and we are in the product table, price column, and we're going to do a column from selection. And what we're going to do here is we want to extract the USD into a column. So we're going to go USD, and all of those USDs become its own column, and we're going to name that currency. So we've extracted the column and rename that currency, and the next thing we're going to do is just hit OK, and now we've added 2 additional columns from that original import of data. So that's how quickly you can transform data, you can add additional information. We're creating these dimension tables so that later on, this is how we're going to filter and analyze some of our data. So we had a price as one column, and now we have the price as MSRP as a currency, and then we have the actual currency as text. So that is where we're at with adding columns from example. So now that we have that, we can remove this price column because that information is now duplicated into the MSRP and the currency. So what we can do is from the transform column at the beginning, you can right click and we can remove that price column. So now we're going to start removing unwanted rows. We're going to go back to the home table and we're going to go to the geography query. And if you notice, those first two rows at the top contain some null information. So we're going to remove rows, which is in the home column, and we're going to remove top rows. And we are going to remove those top two rows. And when you hit OK, now those null values. But now we have that first column, and that is what we want to actually get to the use first rows as headers. So we want to use the first row as headers, and now that'll bring up our zip, city, state, region, district, and country. So we're starting to transform this data so that we can use it. And the next thing we're going to do for the zip, we want to change this to text again, just like we did the last time. So we want to replace the current step. And the last time we did it in the sales column, this time we're doing it in the geography table. And then the final thing we're going to do with this data preparation is from the manufacturing table, we have some bottom rows that need to be deleted. So we're going to go back to the home table. We're going to remove the bottom rows, and we're going to remove the bottom three rows. So we're starting to transform this data and starting to be able to use this. And now we have completed some of the basic data preparation. So that's going to do it for part 2. In part 1, we loaded the data. And in part 2, we transformed the data. Again, I will put the link above, and you can look for it in for the following along exercise. I'll put the dashboard in a day link in the description below. You can also search for it in your web browser. But again, the best way to use Power BI, your 5-step process for Power BI. Number 1 is to load the data. Then you start to prepare the data. Then you make your measures. And then you start to create your reports and visualizations. And then you finalize that for how you're going to share it, setting up your bookmarks and things like that. It's Dashboard in a Day 2023. This is part 2. And hope you're following along in learning Power BI. Let's continue on with Lab 1, transposing data, and we are going to continue along in Power BI. Now we have our queries, and we haven't loaded these queries yet. We're still working on the transformations. On the left-hand side, we have 5 queries: sales, product, geography, manufacturing, and international sales. We rename those in part 2. Now we're going to transpose. So we're going to go to the manufacturing query. And if you notice, we have information across these columns. And we want to get them more into a data preparation mode where we can use those. So we're going to go to column 1, and then we're going to go to the transform tab. And at this point, what we want to do is actually transpose that data. So when you look at it, up underneath the transform, you'll see the transpose button. And this rotates it so that you can then see it. And what we want to do now is bring that first row as a header. So that brings up manufacturer ID, manufacturer, and logo as the header. So those go into the applied steps as well on that Power Query. And on the right-hand side, it says transpose table, promoted headers, and then it changed the type because all 3 of these are text columns. So now we're going to work on what's known as appending queries. There's 2 types of transformations. You have appending queries and you have merging queries. And for appending queries, we're going to go to the sales query, which is then we're going to go down to, we want to append this to the international sales table. So under the home tab, we have append queries. And we're going to append queries, and we're going to do two tables. And the table that we want to append to the sales table is the international sales table. So we want to put these on top of one another. Rather than having two queries, we want to just have one query and put them on top of one another. And we're going to append the international sales table to the sales table. So then that goes into the steps on the right side. So now we have a sales column called country, and there's null values in there. So here's the country column, and you have those null values. So what we're going to do now then is add a column, and it's going to be a conditional column. So what we're going to do now is take that country, go to the add column, and the type of column is going to be a conditional column. So we're going to add and name this column called country name. And the conditions are going to be if country equals, we're going to add null because we have all of those nulls. And the value output is going to be USA because those USA sales did not have the country column. They were just assumed to be in USA sales. So now we're going to fill all those nulls with the USA, and we're going to make that. And then the only thing is if it's not null, we're just going to select the column, and that is going to be country. So this will help us, again, data preparation. It's going to be country name as the column. If country equals null, it's going to be USA. And if it's country, that is going to add that column. So all we need to do now is just add the country name. We have the original country, and now we have country name, and that is in the applied steps. Now the initial country column containing the null values, we do not need that any longer. So we're going to remove that column. And remember, there's a couple of different ways you can remove columns. You can either go back to the home tab and remove columns, but we're going to right click and hit remove. So we've now removed that column. We've added a country name table, and we have that all set up. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to rename this to country. We couldn't name it country before because we had that existing country name table in there. And the only other thing we're going to do is make this a text. We're going to change the data type to text. Therefore, we're going to change the revenue column now to fixed decimal number, because then that'll be a revenue, and that is going to notice the $ change. So the new named country column will have names for all of the countries. If you notice, if we load more, we can get all of the different country names into that column, and it's showing just the initial one. So the next thing we want to do is go to the international sales file. We updated the null values to USA, and we now have a country column with a text format, and we also have the revenue changed to a decimal number. For currency, the next thing in international sales, since we appended that to sales, we want to right-click and uncheck the enable load. Because we have appended that data to the sales table, it'll take longer if we enable the load. Every time we hit refresh, it will load up sales and international sales. And since international sales is now part of the sales table when we appended it, we can uncheck that, and that goes to an italics, and that is now unable to load, and that will just make this data file more efficient and quicker when you're updating your queries and loading. So the next thing we want to do is from the View tab is to show you the query dependencies. This is a way to look at We'll make this bigger so that you can see, and we'll make it a little bit bigger on the zoom level. But now you see your load disabled on the international sales, and your sales, we have not loaded any of this data yet. So that is what we're going to be doing at the end of the lab 1 here. Remember, this is part 3 of Dashboard in a Day, and there's 5 labs. This is lab 1, and we see the query dependencies. The next thing we want to do is go to the file and close and apply all of these changes. So we've added all of these queries, we've added the data sources, we've made our data transformation changes, and now we are going to close and apply. So this will take quite a bit because we've got all of our sales tables that need to load, we've got our geography tables that need to load, and the sales table is quite of a large table, but at least now we're not loading some of the different things. So then what we're going to do now is, after this loads, is we're going to save this file. If you have not saved yet, we are going to save this file. I've named it Dashboard in a Day Part 3, but this is lab 1. So that's what we're going to do now, is after all of these changes, we're going to update that name and be ready for lab number 2. So that is how we initially go into the data transformation stage of Power BI. So when you're learning Power BI, remember, at the end of the day, you're going to try to answer business questions. But the first step is to connect to your data. The second step is to transform the data. Cleaning and extracting and connecting your data is probably going to be about 60% of your time when you're in Power BI as a Power BI developer. Now, there are also people that use Power BI, but they are more users. So we're designing a lot of these dashboards for other people to use for the visualizations. So that is the end of lab 1. The data has been loaded, and we now have our geography table, our manufacturer table, the product table, and the sales table, and we are ready for lab number 2. If you have a question, leave that in the comments below. We're going to go to lab number 2, and we're going to continue on with Dashboard in a Day 2023. Remember to save your file under File. We're going to save this into our folder and have this as Lab 1 complete. Lab 1 complete, Dashboard in a Day 2023 in Power BI. And in Lab 2, now that we have the data loaded, we're going to start working on exploring that data, and we're going to build our basic relationships. Now remember, one of the advantages of Power BI is with multiple sources of data, you can build those relationships, and we're going to talk about how to build those with our demo model. And then we're going to take a look at some of the data explorations and get a look at that model view in Power BI. It's Dashboard in a Day, lab number 2, and let's go to Power BI. Dashboard in a Day, lab number 2, and this time around we finished off lab 1 with our 4 queries: geography, manufacturer, product, and sales. And Dashboard in a Day number 2, we are going to start working on relationships. We will also take a look at the 3 different views in Power BI. So when you open Power BI, you have a blank screen, and on the right-hand side, you see our data, which is where we left off in lab number 1. This is called the report view, and the report view is where eventually we will do our visualizations. The second view is the data view, and in the data view, that is where you can actually see what the data looks like. So that's where we have our geography data, the manufacturing data, the product data, and the sales data. And then the model view is where you set up some of your preliminary relationships so that we can make this a relationship database. So we're going to continue on with Power BI, and after taking a look at the top 3 views, you can start to navigate around different areas of the Power BI. You have your home menu, you have your modeling menu, you have your optimize menu. So the one thing we're going to want to do is go to the data view, and we're going to look at the sales data. So the sales data includes the country, the date, the product ID, revenue, units, and zip. And also you have formatting. You can do some table tools, you have external tools, and you can also set up some of your basic formatting. So what we want to do now is we're going to go to the relationship model, and we are going to take a look at some of the different tables that we have in this model. So we'll be doing that in a few minutes. Right now, we're kind of just going to have set up an automatic relationship between the manufacturer table and the product table, which we'll delete that just so that we'll start fresh. And also we have our sales table, and that is over here, and we're going to delete that relationship as well. So we're going to have all 4 of our tables that we're going to start to build our relationship model with. And first off, what we're going to do is kind of give you an overview of some of the different types of relationships that you can do. So in the report view, the first thing we are going to do is select the clustered column chart from the visualization pane. So these are all of the different type of visualizations that you can do in Power BI. So when we choose those visualizations, we can then take a look, and the first one we're going to choose is what's known as the clustered column chart. And you click on that, and it brings up the different chart options. Now what we want to do is input, you've got your x-axis, you've got your y-axis, and you've got your legend. So the thing we want to do is we want to bring in from the x-axis, we want to go to the geography table, and we want to select the country table. Now that doesn't do anything until we actually bring up the y-axis. And in the y-axis, we're going to go to the sales table. We're going to click on the revenue field. And if you notice, we now have all of the different countries. We have the revenue by country, but they all list it as the same. And the reason why it does that is because the relationship has not been set up, and the sum of revenue is the same for all of those. So now we're going to go to the relationship view and set up our relationship. We are in the report view in Power BI. Now, if we go to the relationship and try to create a relationship between the zip codes of the geography table and the sales table, you are going to get an error message that says it's a many-to-many relationship. And this is what we do not want. We usually want to have a one-to-many relationship. So we are going to cancel out of this, and we are going to create a new column. And you can create new columns inside these tables. The first one we're going to create is inside geography. And in the table tools, we're going to create a new column. The new column is going to be called zip country. And this is going to be the sales zip code. And the parentheses will bring in the comma, because anything inside parentheses is treated as text. And then we're going to add the sales country. So that'll create the first column inside the sales table. So it's going to work on it. So inside the sales table, we have a zip country. So now we're going to go to the geography table and create a column. The column is going to be called zip country. And formula is going to be zip country equals geography zip. Then we want the comma inside quotations. Then we're going to add geography country. We're going to close out the parentheses. Actually, we're going to cancel the parentheses. So we got geography zip equals zip and geography country. So we're going to create that column. So now if we go back to the model view, we can create our first relationship. So from the geography table to the sales table, we're going to use those two new columns that we created, and this is going to create the relationship. So we're going to take the zip country from the geography table, drag it to the sales table. That is going to create a 1. The 1 side is on the geography. That's what that 1 is. And then on the asterisk on the sales is the one-to-many relationship. And once we do that, that is going to see, if you go back to the report menu, now you see the correct totals come up on the revenue by country. Now that we have the relationship working with the geography and the sales, we're going to add in 2 additional relationships. We've got the manufacturer ID, and we are going to bring that over to the manufacturer ID in the product table. And that's a one-to-many relationship, the 1 for manufacturer, and the product is the many side. And then we're going to add in the product ID to the product ID. So now we have the 1 side is the product, the many side is the sales. And a lot of times that is what happens because the sales ends up becoming the fact table, which allows more for the values in your visuals. So now we're going to add to our chart. Inside the legend, we're going to go to the manufacturing table and add the manufacturer. And that is going to add in the different legends for all the different manufacturers. So that is how you can build out your tables and start to drive some of your insights. So we're going to try a different visual. So currently we have this one selected here, which is the clustered column chart. So now we're going to try the stacked column chart. And that visualizes it a little bit differently, but it shows the total revenue and how it's broken into. So what we can do now is add in and sort the legend by descending. And that'll bring in the highest to the lowest from left to right, which is what makes it easier to read for the viewer. And remember, when you're designing your visuals, we'll talk about this more when we get into Lab 5, is you want to make the visuals so that people can get kind of tell a story with the visual. Now that we have the visual, we are going to start to show you some of the filter pane options. So we want to filter the top N, and we're going to select the top 5, and then we are going to bring over the revenue. And when we apply this filter, that is going to show us the top 5. So that is an example of how to use the filters. We're now going to go back to the main part of the visual, and we are going to focus in on some of the exploration options of some of the data we have. So if we go to the formatting of the visual, if you click on this brush icon, this will add or remove elements. And what we are going to do now is take a look at some of the different formatting options. So if we want to see data labels, we can click those on. So now we have the data labels showing in each of those visuals. So that's an example of showing the data levels. So now we can remove the total labels. So right now, if you wanted to see the total labels, you could have the totals and you could turn those off. One of the advantages of Power BI for your advanced data analysis is you can do groupings inside the different columns to create some additional metrics so that you can keep track of your top competitors. So if you are in the manufacturing query and you right-click, you can create a new group. And we're going to create a new group. And we're going to include, by pressing down the control key, you will hit aliquot, cirrus, natura, and pyrum. So that'll be the group. So we're going to add them, group them, and now they become a different group. Now for the name of the group, we are going to name this Top Competitors. So this allows us to create a group. The second group we are going to create is a Van Arsdale group. So we're going to select that, hit group, and then we are going to name this Van Arsdale. And then we're going to check this box that says include other group to rename the rest of the groups. So we're continuing along in Power BI. If you notice on the right-hand side now, we have a Top Competitors group, we have a Van Arsdale group, and we're slowly starting to explore this data in Power BI. The more features that you can take advantage of with grouping and with doing some of the different visualizations, that is how the Power BI users are going to get the most out of Power BI. We're continuing along in Lab 2. This is Part 4. If you want to watch Parts 1, 2, and 3, make sure to look for them in the channel below. And again, you can do a search in your search bar for Digital Dashboard in a Day and download the materials and follow along as we continue to learn Power BI. Dashboard in a Day, Power BI, and we continue on learning Power BI. What I like about Dashboard in a Day, if you're thinking about making the switch to Excel or want to start learning Power BI, this tutorial is a step-by-step approach to show you just some of the different capabilities. We kind of keep it at the high level end for just ease of use, but then if you follow along, you can see something. There's always something you can do in Power BI that applies to your business situation. And that's what you're trying to do with Power BI, is answer business questions. In Part 1, we loaded the data. In Part 2, we did some data transformations and data prep in Part 3. In Part 4, we started to do some basic explorations, did some groupings. And in Part 5, we're going to do some more data explorations, show you some of the possibilities that you can use in Power BI. After you transform your data and load your data, then you can start to explore a little bit with your data and make some better business decisions for the people that actually consume the Power BI templates that you design. So let's go back into Power BI. Now that we've created our manufacturer groups, and one of the things I did redo this is I renamed this first group, which includes the aliquot, cirrus, natura, and pyrum top competitors, and then we changed the name of the group to manufacturer groups. So now that we have that set up, we can change out the legend and we can add data and we can add in the manufacturer group to see our top competitors, Van Arsdale, and other. And this shows that the top competitors in the USA comprise a lot of the sales. Meanwhile, in Australia, the top competitors also comprise a lot of the top sales. So now we will click in the open area. We are going to create a tree map. And this tree map is a way of showing proportions to that revenue. So for the values from the sales table, we are going to add in revenue. And for the category, we are going to add in the manufacturer. So this shows proportionally Van Arsdale has the highest proportion of sales, as they are this large blue number. Now, when you click on Van Arsdale, this cross filters our stacked bar chart. And if you unclick that, then it goes back to what it does. That's called cross-highlighting. So that's just another example of some of the different things you can do in Power BI with your visualizations. So another thing you can do is you can show as a table. So if you want to see the raw numbers, you can look at this as a table. It'll show you the USA sales, the top competitor sales, and the Van Arsdale sales by country. And if you click on this back to report, that will bring you back to the report view. So now we have our tree map, we have our stacked bar chart, we've created a group here to explore some of our data. And the next thing we are going to do is continue along with our data exploration as we start to build out this chart. So if you take a look at the highlighting of the Van Arsdale by clicking on that, that is called cross-highlighting. So now we want to do is start working on the page filters. The next filter we are going to create is called a page level filter. So if we select the manufacturer group and apply it to this page, that means we could start to, if we wanted to select the top competitors, that would filter out on this page. If we wanted to select Van Arsdale, we could filter out the Van Arsdale sales. So that's an example of some of the different filtering. And if we want to take a look at the sales over time, now we can create another visual. We'll move this up a little bit. We're going to make this smaller. And we're also going to move the stacked bar chart. So now we have our different filters and we can see the different tree map also. So the next thing we're going to do is do a visual that shows a little bit of a time series. And normally when you do time series, you want to look at date hierarchy. So that's what we're going to create next here in Power BI. In order to create the date hierarchy, we need to change and update the options in our file. So if you notice on the sales, we have a column called date, and we need to make that a date field. So we are going to select under File, and we're going to go to Options and Settings. Now under Options and Settings, you have a couple of different things you can do. You have, for the global options and settings, this is every time you use Power BI, we're going to focus in here on the current file. So under the current file, under the data load, we are going to select this auto date time, and this will help us create our hierarchy. Now there's lots of different options in the current file. You can set your regional settings, you can set your privacy settings, but for the data load, we're going to select the auto date and time, then we are going to select OK. So what that is going to help us do is create a date hierarchy. So now it's got this little calendar icon under the date. And if you notice, we have a date hierarchy created, which includes the year, the quarter, the month, and the day. So with that information, this data hierarchy, we're going to create our next visual. Time to create the next visual, and this one is going to be a clustered column chart. So we're going to select the white area on the report view, select new, and this pops up. And now we're going to start to build out this chart to see that date hierarchy to show you kind of how this works. So the first thing we're going to do is for the x-axis, we are going to bring in this date hierarchy. And now for the y-axis, we are going to bring in our revenue. And this shows you the revenue by year in this date hierarchy. So we see 2014 all the way to 2021. And again, if you start to cross highlight, we've got this, you can select a year and the other years will start to cross highlight. Back in the report view, we are now going to take a look at the different sales by year. So we're going to click on the stacked column chart, and now we're going to do is click on the icon to add data and build your visual. We're going to remove the legend. And when we remove the legend, this allows us to see all of the sales by country, sum of revenue by country, and then we have our tree map, and then we have our newest visual, which shows kind of a time series on the sum of revenue by year. So if we now go to the tree map, we can take a look at the manufacturer, and if we want to, we'll highlight all of them so we're not filtering anything out. If we select on Van Arsdale, this shows us the revenue by year. Now, if we select on Control over here, we now can see Australia highlighted in all three of the charts. So that shows you how you can do, and you kind of see a spike in some of the different chart areas. So this shows you a little bit more how you can visualize your chart. The next visual to show you is the drill down feature. If you select the sum of revenue by year and you select the drill down, you can see the next level in the hierarchy. So right now it's showing by year. And this hierarchy, if you look at the date hierarchy, it goes year, quarter, month, and day. So if we go back to this visual and click the down button, this will now show us quarter, because that's the next quarter in the hierarchy. If we click down again, it'll show us by month, and then the bottom level of the hierarchy is the day. So you literally can see the day. Now to get that back up to the top of the hierarchy, you hit the drill up arrow, and then it goes back up to the month, and it goes to the quarter, and back to the year. So that is a look at the drill down feature in Power BI. We are in Lab 2, Part 5. And remember, all of the different data exploration techniques, some of these you're going to use more than other. Make sure to watch the videos, Part 1, 2, 3, and 4, where we load the data. We start to do some of the data prep. And then here in Part 5, we actually drill down and start to explore the data. So we're going to finish up and move along here in Lab 2 as we continue along with the data exploration. Dashboard in a day, Power BI, and we continue on learning Power BI. What I like about Dashboard in a day, if you're thinking about making the switch to Excel or want to start learning Power BI, this tutorial is a step-by-step approach to show you just some of the different capabilities. We kind of keep it at the high level end for just ease of use, but then if you follow along, you can see something. There's always something you can do in Power BI that applies to your business situation. And that's what you're trying to do with Power BI, is answer business questions. In Part 1, we loaded the data. In Part 2, we did some data transformations and data prep in Part 3. In Part 4, we started to do some basic explorations, did some groupings. And in Part 5, we're going to do some more data explorations, show you some of the possibilities that you can use in Power BI. After you transform your data and load your data, then you can start to explore a little bit with your data and make some better business decisions for the people that actually consume the Power BI templates that you design. So let's go back into Power BI. Back in Power BI Lab 2, we continue on with data exploration. The next two things we're going to do is show you how to add a slicer, show you some of the different slicer options. Then we are going to add a card visual that helps show data in a number. So let's take a look. First off, from your data visualization gallery, you do have what looks like a filter. It's a funnel, and it's called a slicer. And if you click on a white area in the report view and then click on the slicer will come up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the field from the manufacturer to have a list of manufacturers as our slicer. So that's where we're currently at. We currently have all of those different available. And if you click on the Van Arsdale, it will start to filter the other visuals. So if you click on Van Arsdale, your revenue by country changes, your tree map changes, and also the revenue by month changes. The next thing we're going to do is change this slicer. If you click on, we'll click off all of the options, and if you click on the more options, the slicer settings, and you have 3 different types of slicers. You can do a vertical list, a tile, or a drop down. So we can make this a drop down, and then now we can choose whichever one we want for the slicer. So those are some different slicer options. Then the next thing we're going to do is show you when we take a look at the card visuals. We're going to click in a blank area, and for your card visual, it's this little card visual that looks like a 1, 2, 3. If you click on this, and then you've got 2 options. You've got the add data to build your visual, and then once you get that in there, this one doesn't have any other options. So we're going to add the data, and for the data, we're going to go back to sales and add in the revenue. We're going to make this a little bit bigger, and now we have the revenue and we can start to filter that for all of the different countries. It's 2.7. If we click on the Van Arsdale, it's 1.28 billion. So that is a look at the slicer and the card value. And the next thing we're going to do is build one of our first formulas. We're going to create a new table, and that is going to be called a calendar table. So the first thing you want to do is go to the sales table by clicking on this little cylinder icon. That'll bring up all of your different tables, and we are going to click off all of those. And in the insert, we're going to insert from the modeling menu. You can do a new table, a new column, a new parameter. We'll talk more about those later on, but the new table is going to be a calendar table, and the formula for that is going to be calendar, and we're going to call this a date table, which is the name of the table, and it's going to be calendar, which is the function, and we're going to bring in the date, which is in parentheses 2014, the 1st of January. We're going to close out the parentheses, so that's the start date. Then the end date after the comma is date, and that is going to be 2022, and it's going to be 12/31, December 31st. So now we have a table that has a start date and an end date. 2014 is the start date, January 1st, and the end date is 2022, December 31st. We've created the date table, so now we're going to select that date table, go to the data view, and currently the date type is date time. We are going to switch that to date. Now we are going to go to the model view, and we're going to set up a relationship between the date table and the sales table. So we are going to bring date over to date, and that is going to create a one-to-many relationship between the two tables. And then at this point, we're going to start to clean this up a little bit. We have our geography table, we have our sales table, manufacturer, which is connected to the product table, and the product table goes to the sales table. So we're going to put the manufacturer table right up there, and now we're going to bring over the date table to add that to the relationship. The relationship has been created. Now let's go see what it looks like in our report view. And you notice the sum of revenue by date chart now has a date that goes down to each of the individual days. And the reason for this is we have the date set up to the sales table. So we are going to delete that. And now we're going to bring in from the date table that date function. And then we're going to have it set up now with the same type of formatting. And if we want to bring this up, we can drill this back up to the month, quarters, and back up to the years. So that is how you, and then what we're going to do is go back to the sales table. And since that's now going to be our official date table, we want to right click on the date and we want to hide. That way we only take the date column. It's not even an option on the sales table. So that is one way to make sure your models are efficient. We're going to hide that. And we are also going to hide zip country from the geography table. So that will hide that. And then we're going to hide manufacturing ID from the manufacturing table. And the reason why is we want to use those, and we'll learn more about this in our relationships, but you want to make your models easy for the users. And then we're going to hide product ID and manufacturer ID from the product table. So product ID, we'll hide that. And then we're going to hide the manufacturer ID from the product table. So now we've made it up so we can use, it's best practice to hide fields that are not used in the report visuals. And these fields are the basis of our relationships between each of those tables. So when you go back to relationship view, the columns that we just hid, showed by this little icon with the not shown icon, that means those are the relationships. Zip country is used as the relationship to sales, so we don't want that to show. Same thing with product ID and manufacturer ID, and then we have now hidden out those tables, and we can take a look at more of these when we get further into the dashboard in a day. Let's continue along with our data visualization and exploration. Now we currently have the sum of revenue by country chart selected, and we are going to add some additional hierarchies. So if we go to the geography field and select state, that will bring in the state data. And then if we go back to geography and put in the district, that'll bring in the district. So now we talked earlier about the date hierarchies. Now we can drill up and drill down by either selecting Aliqui or Natura, or we can select Van Arsdale. And the drill down feature, we can click to turn on drill down. Then if we click on Australia, we can see the breakdown by the Van Arsdale revenue. And if we click on 2021, you get the cross highlighting across the chart, $70 million. And the sum of revenue by manufacturer also does highlight. So that is a look at some of the cross highlighting and the hierarchy. And now we've made a date hierarchy, and we've got a geography hierarchy. So now let's go to the product table, and we're going to make a product hierarchy. So if you go to the product table, and we are going to select to the right of the category field, we're going to select the create hierarchy. And this creates the category hierarchy. And now we bring in the different layers that we want in that hierarchy. So the three things that we want is category, segment, and product. So we already started out with category. That's already there. Now we add the segment category. We're going to add to the hierarchy. We're going to add it to the category hierarchy. And then we're going to do the product, click on the right clicks, and then we're going to add that to the category hierarchy. So now we have and then we're going to name this product hierarchy. So now we have a product hierarchy that includes category, segment, and product. We will select on a blank area of the canvas. We'll move this up here and we'll go back down here. And now we'll create a clustered bar chart where we'll use this product hierarchy. And we'll bring in the data pane. And what we're going to do now is bring in our y-axis is going to be from the product table, is going to be the product hierarchy. And the x-axis is going to be the revenue. And now we can take a look at, we can drill down by segment, and then we can drill down further by product. In the sum of revenue by category visual, we have now shown you how you can drill down to the next level. And you can also, from the visual gallery, see some of the different options in your data view. This time around, we are going to go to the data gallery and change it to a matrix table. And a matrix table works the same way. You can drill down to the next level in the hierarchy or drill back up. And when you drill down, you can see some of the different options. So with that, we are now going to add from the data table to the value menu, we are going to add revenue again. And so this is a duplicate right now. And if we right click on this, we can show this as a percentage of grand total. And the only other thing we're going to do now to this chart, as we look at some of the different options, you can see how quickly you can build out your visuals and take a look at the data from the pane. So those are just some more examples of way to use the visualizations on the matrix or on your other visualizations. The data exploration continues. We've did some data visualization and started to explore the data, and now you get to the point in Power BI where you start to work on some of your calculations. There's two types of calculations you can do. One is a calculated column, which is evaluated row by row in that column of the table. A second one is a measure, when we want to aggregate values from many rows of the table. We're going to create our first measure in this table. The first thing we are going to do is select the sales table, and if you click on the ellipsis, you will see a new measure. We will click on the new measure, and the first measure we are going to create is prior year sales. Now, prior year sales is going to be the name of this measure. And we're going to use a calculate function, and we're going to use the sum of the sales revenue. And we're going to close out that parentheses. Then we're going to use the same period last year, and we're going to bring up our date table. So we're going to bring up our date, and that is going to close out the measure. And now we have a measure on the sales table called prior year sales. And we're going to create another measure using a little bit different method this time around. And this time around, we are going to use the modeling feature, and we're in the sales table, and we're going to click the new measure up here at the top, just underneath the home menu. And so the new measure this time around is going to be called percentage growth. And percentage growth is going to be the name. And when you're writing DAX, which is the language of the measures inside Power BI, you can also use it in Excel. Percentage of growth is going to equal the divide function. And we're going to divide the sum of sales revenue, close out the parentheses. We're going to minus left bracket previous year's sales. So you can use measures inside other measures, and then now we're going to close out that measure. So previous year's sales growth is going to be divide sum of sales revenue minus previous year's sales, comma, previous year's sales. So you can use the measure inside other measures. So when we add this measure, we now have two measures, and it's the icon of the little calculator. We have percentage growth, and we also have a previous year's sales measure. So if we click on the matrix, we can add the new measure, which is percentage of growth, and we also can add the previous year's sales to that measure. So that is how you're going to start to add your measures to your matrices and your visuals as you continue in your Power BI. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see the percentage of growth. The only thing we need to do is the percentage of growth needs to be a percentage, and we're going to change that to 1 decimal spot for the percentage. So you'll see the growth of the different categories. If we want to drill up, if we drill all the way up, we can see that youth was percentage of growth 2%, 22% for mix, a negative growth for rural, and you can see the previous year's sales on this matrix. One of the advantages of your measures is that you can format the measure once, and then every time you use that measure, it will already be formatted. So every time we use that percentage growth measure, it'll be formatted as a percentage with 1 decimal. And what we're going to do now is take the prior year's sales, and we're going to make sure that that format is currency. And we're also going to double check that revenue is set at currency. So those are just some of the options. Remember, with Power BI, you can always reuse your measures in other measures, and we have completed Lab 2 of the Dashboard in a Day 2023. The first 6 lessons cover parts Labs 1 and 2, where we import the data, and then we also transform that data and start to work with measures and do some exploratory analysis of the visualization. So we've got 3 labs to go, labs 3, 4, and 5, and you can check out the other videos in this series, Dashboard in a Day 2023. Lab number 3, what we have done now is went through the first 2 stages of the data preparation. We loaded the data, we made some transformations in Power Query, we started to do some of the data exploration, and from the digital dashboard in a day, we have downloaded the completed Lab 2 so that we are all on the same data set. We refresh the data and we're all set to go. Remember, we have our sum of revenue by country chart. We have our sum of revenue by year. First thing we're going to start off with is in the matrix chart. We are going to select that chart and we are going to add conditional formatting. Now, when you select the conditional formatting button, there's 2 options. You've got the data button, and then you have the add or removing visual elements, and that is what we are going to select in the matrix chart. With that, we are going to go to the cell elements. And the cell elements allows you to add either conditional formatting, background colors, icons, and the first thing we are going to do is you can choose from the matrix which of the columns you want to add the conditional formatting to. So you have sum of revenue, you have percentage revenue growth, percentage of grand total revenue, and the prior year sales in this matrix. We are going to choose the percentage growth. Then your options in the cell elements include the background color, the font color, data bars, icons, and a web URL. We are going to select turn on the background color. So that brings in the background color for percentage growth. Now we want to change that and add a middle color. This will add that third color to make it more of a high to low type gradient. So by adding that and then selecting OK, we now add that into the visual element. So we now have that inside the middle color. So that is the percentage of conditional formatting. And we have added that for Van. And currently, remember, this is selected on Van Arsdale. So if we go to, we're currently filtered to the USA, and we can unfilter that. And you start to see some of those gradients when you select either the year or the other manufacturers. So you can see that conditional formatting in action. Let's continue to focus in on the drill down feature in Power BI. Let's select the sum of revenue by country, and we're going to hit the drill down button. That will turn on the drill down, and we are going to select Australia. And when you select Australia, we then drill down to the states, and we will disable the drill down mode, revenue by country and state visual. So that turns it off. Now when we take a look at the percentage of growth for 2021, we see the percentage of growth having that conditional formatting we just set in there. At this point, we're ready to move on to the next part of the data visualizations. Again, reminder, the Dashboard in a Day course is really just to show you all of the options. The best way to do this course is to, as you're doing some of the visualizations, as you're working through the Dashboard in a Day, think about how you can apply this to your business, your data, and how you want to set up some of your different visualizations in your Power BI. So we're going to work now on the manufacturing slicer and do the next visualization. Next, we are going to select the manufacturer visual, and we are now going to add or remove visual options. And for the slicer settings, we are going to make this a tile. And that shows us some of the different options for the tile. Let's make some room for this tile. Let's move this visual over, and we'll bring our tile visual down, and we'll make it a little bit bigger. And now we will select Van Arsdale and see the different filters. Now we are going to add the image URLs for the manufacturing logos. So if you select on the logo in the manufacturing, and then for the data category, we are going to select image URL. That will make the logo a image URL. Then we select on the manufacturing, and on the data tab, we're going to delete the manufacturer, and we are now going to add the logo, and that will bring up our logos for the different companies. So we're going to position this at the top of our dashboard. We'll move this down, we'll move this over, and now we have our logos for each of the different manufacturers. Next, we are going to select the revenue by year, and we're going to make this from, currently, it is a clustered column, and we are now going to switch this to a line and clustered column chart. So when we add that, and then for the data on the y-axis, we are going to add the percentage growth from the measure we created. And now we add the line axis. The next step is to turn the current card visual. This is a card visual that we created in lab number 2, And now we are going to make this into a gauge. It's this little gauge symbol in the data visualization category. And the only difference we're going to change to this is the target value is going to be the prior year sales, which is the measure we created in lab number 2. So now we've set up the gauge. Now that we've created the gauge visual and added in the logos, let's start to resize and configure this into the final dashboard we are going to end up with. So we are going to move a few things around, and remember, chart visualization and building a dashboard is kind of an art and a science. There's no particular size that it needs to be, and you can also move some things around. So the first thing we're going to do is move the gauge over here. We're going to make this a little bit smaller for now, and we're going to move the matrix to the right. The sum of revenue chart is going to get moved to the right, and we got to fit all of this in. We are going to bring over the logos, and the revenue by country chart we're going to make smaller, and we're going to move that over here. So we're starting to build out this dashboard. We still have quite a bit of work to do, but at least this way we kind of start to move some of the elements into the right spots as we continue to build out the dashboard. Next step is start to show you some of the different themes that are available in Power BI. We're going to check on the gauge metric, and we're going to start to work on some of the themes. If you go to View, these are built-in themes, and the different themes have names for them. This is Bloom, this is City Park, this is Classic. The one we are going to choose is the temperature theme, and that switches the entire theme on the report. So that is how you change the theme for the entire report. Now, you can also, besides the built-in themes, you can create themes and manage your themes. So in the dashboard and a day materials, you can select a theme that the marketing department uses for all of its themes. So if you go browse for themes and you go into the materials, there is a theme, and we're going to use that, and that will then import into the gallery. And now when you choose, it successfully imported that theme, and now that one is actually able to be used. And that is where we can now change the theme on the different reports. So that theme is being used, and we'll continue on. We're going to use digital in a dashboard theme number 2, and that is the theme that is going to be used. And now we're starting to build out that dashboard slowly and starting to see some of the different features. So the next thing we're going to do is format the gauge icon. So we're going to select the gauge icon. Next, we are going to change the target label on the gauge. When you click on that visual and you click on the more options under the gauge axis, we're going to change the color, and the target color is currently that light blue. We are now going to change that to black in the gauge. We're going to make 2 more changes to the gauge visual. We are going to check the data labels and make that 10 point. You'll notice the size changed a little bit smaller, and then the target label is currently 12 point. We are going to make that 10 point as well. Those are some of the options from the formatting options for the gauge visual, and all of the different visuals have options that allow you to make the visual easier to understand, easier to read, change the size bigger or smaller. You can change the font. Next, we're going to start working on the matrix visual. We're in Lab 3 of Dashboard in a Day. Make sure to look for the link to the Dashboard in a Day materials in the description below. And check out the previous videos, parts 1 through 6, or we combine them all into one file. So you can do Labs 1 and 2 in Dashboard in a Day. It's Dashboard in a Day 2023 and Lab 3. This is part 1. We're going to come back in part 2 of Lab 3. Back in Power BI, we left off part 1 with the transformations to the gauge. Now we're going to work on the revenue by state. Now currently this is set at the state level. So we're going to click on the drill up button to get this back up to the country level. And now we are going to choose the add or remove visual elements so that we can change the colors on the bar graph. So by selecting more options, the formatting options come up, and now we're going to start to work on the columns in the chart. So we are going to go to the column colors. Currently it is set as a blue, and we're going to go to this white 30% darker, which is a little bit of a lighter gray. So we have changed those to a gray color, and we move on to the next step here in this visualization. And again, with all of these different little changes, some of these you're going to have brand colors. Some of these colors you're going to want to have consistently on all of your reports. And now we're going to work on the data labels for the sum of country revenue. So when you go to the data labels, we're going to turn those on, and you see those numbers start to come out. So now we have the data labels. They're sitting at the top of the chart, and we're going to display those. And your options are the orientation, the auto, and the values. And the display units is going to be changed to the millions. Next, we go to the sum of revenue and percentage growth by year. And when we click on the axis for the date year 2022, there is no data for that year. So rather than having it show a blank, we're going to exclude that from the chart. Next step is to get the colors to match up with the sum of revenue by country. In the sum of revenue growth year, we currently have the formatting options, and we just changed the colors. So now we are going to change the colors on the columns, and we're going to change that to that same gray that we just changed the revenue by country. Now for the lines, which is currently blue, we're going to change that to a color of black. So we've built out that visual. Time now to add the report title, and we are going to go to the insert, and we are going to add a text box. And the text that we are going to add is manufacturer analysis. And we are going to change the font to 32 point. And the only other change we're going to do is Surgu bold. So we'll stretch this out a little bit, and that is the chart title. The next step is to start to position the chart title on the page. And now we're going to move the sum of revenue by country below the manufacturer analysis. And the next step is to move the sum of revenue growth by year. And we're going to put the gauge on the right-hand side. So this is roughly the layout that we currently have for the... Next up, we're going to rename the page to manufacturer. Next step is we are going to use a background image to format the report. So we're going to select the white space on the canvas, and then from the visualization panel, we are going to go to the canvas background, and we are going to browse for what we want for the canvas background. And the background is located in the digital dashboard in a day. And now we have the background image set up. and we want that to be 100%, and we are going to select that in there. So now we have set the background and the transparency. We're going to change that to 0, and that'll bring up the background. Now we adjust some of the template images to get these to fit into the template boxes. And now we are going to add an image. So in the dashboard in a day final, we have the Van Arsdale logo. We're going to import that, and we bring that logo into and in order to see the logo, you need to put it on the blue background. So we will change that to 20 point, and that will show the logo. To make the manufacturer analysis more in the background, we are going to select that icon, and then we are going to select the background, and we're going to change the transparency from 0 to 100% to make that be transparent. And manufacturer, we're going to add an R into the analysis. So now we've got the background starting to shape up a little bit. We've moved we've added a logo, and now we want to start to add the narrative, smart narrative visual to our report. So we want to make some room on this left-hand side to add some smart narratives. First thing we're going to do is make this a little bit smaller. And we're going to change this, move this up. And then in this square area is where our smart narrative is going to go. In addition to the visuals that are built into the data visual gallery, you can get visuals and add visuals. And inside the dashboard in a day materials is a visual. So we're going to get the Get More Visual button. And that's going to bring up the option, and it's going to be called the play axis. So we're going to search for play axis, and we're going to bring that into Power BI, and we're going to add it. And this is going to help us use some of the smart narratives. So now that visual has been added, and here it is up here. So we are going to be clicking on the blank area, and we're going to add this visual. And the field we are going to add is going to be the date. And so now we've got the play axis visual added. Now we are going to format the data visual, and we're going to show all of the colors, and we're going to format the different colors to match up. Yellow is going to be the play, pause is going to be blue, and you see those colors get added to the visual. The next is kind of the purple. Now that we have the report ready, we're going to start working on bookmarks, and from the ribbon view, we're going to go to the View tab, and we will start to work on the bookmarks. Bookmarks allow you to have predetermined states that users can click on them and go to a set of features that you've set up for that bookmark. So the first thing we're going to do is add a bookmark. We're going to double click on it, and we're going to name this bookmark the initial state, which will show the initial state of the report. And that'll get you the first book set up. And now we will start to work on what we want this initial state to look like. So we are going to go to the sum of revenue by country, and we want to select the USA column. And this changed when I clicked on this. It changed the numbers on a couple of the different graphs. So the USA is selected, and if you right-hand click and click the spotlight, that's going to put the spotlight on the revenue by country. And then we will add this state. We will add a bookmark, and we will call this USA revenue. So now we've got two bookmarks. If we go back to the initial state bookmark, you see the entire report at the beginning. Now we click on the USA revenue and we see that revenue by country spotlighted. So that shows you how you can do your bookmarks. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to make sure nothing on the canvas is selected. And we're going to select Australia in the sum of revenue by country. And we're going to add a third bookmark. And we are going to add this as the name of the bookmark is going to be Australia revenue. We have the three bookmarks set, and again, you can use these bookmarks to go to different states of view. This shows you Australia revenue, this shows you the USA revenue, and this shows you the initial state. Next up is we are going to add some bookmark navigator buttons to the canvas. So we are going to go to the ribbon menu, and we are going to select Insert, and this is where you see the buttons icon. And the button icon, you've got all different kinds of buttons, and you can start to get a feel for information buttons, back buttons, reset buttons, and the whole list of Navigator. And we are going to select Navigator, and we're going to select Bookmark Navigator as the choice. So that goes up at the top. And now we are going to resize this, and we are going to place this below the play axis. We can make this smaller, and now we will select this bookmark icon and put this in the lower half of the page. So now we're going to start setting up those bookmark buttons and show you how these work. With the bookmark button selected, and you click on the options, you can start to set the bookmark options, and you notice you've got which bookmark, you've got all bookmarks, and you can start to see some of the different bookmark options. For the bookmark formatting options, we are going to click on Style, and we are going to start to change out. And for the color, it is currently the font color, and then we have the fill. And for the fill, we are going to change that to a light blue. So that will get us that's kind of a light gray. We'll actually change this to a lighter blue. And currently the USA bookmark is selected, and then you go to the initial state. So we're just going to set in the fill, and we're going to set the transparency to right around 40%, 37%. And the shape, we can change the shape of and we're going to change that to a rounded rectangle. But you've got quite a few options. You've got an arrow, a heart, a hexagon. You've got an oval. If you want to make it an oval, you could make it a pill. So you can take a look at some of the different ones. We are going to go with the rounded rectangle as the option. Now that we have the play axis and we also have the bookmarks, the final visualization in this chapter, Lab 3, under the AI visuals, you have key influencers, decomposition tree, question and answer, and smart narrative. We are going to select the smart narrative, and the smart narrative will start to go into that spot, and so we will add that narrative. So that is the basic layout of this dashboard. Now again, the dashboard visualization, what I recommend is get all of the elements into the dashboard, then start to tweak, change your colors, change your font sizes, because you can spend a good half hour, 40 minutes on setting up a perfect dashboard aligned, get your grids aligned, make it the right font size. And you want to do all of that at the end where you kind of want to think out what's going to be on the page. that is the final section for lab number 3. Don't forget, labs 1 and 2 are already up on the channel, and you can subscribe to this channel to get all of the labs. Labs 4 and 5 will be the final 2 labs of Dashboard in a Day 2023. Lab 3 is parts 1 and 2 on Dashboard in a Day 2023, and this is the data visualization lab for Dashboard in a Day. Now, the visualizations have changed a little bit. They added a second page called Market Analysis. Then we also have a page called By Manufacturer. And the first thing we're going to do before we go to the Power BI service, and remember, Power BI has a Power BI service, and then you have Power BI Desktop, and labs 1 through 3 are Power BI Desktop. Now, for Power BI Service, you do need a Pro license. This is lab 4. From the View menu, we are going to make a mobile layout. And before we do that, the first thing we want to do is change Market Analysis to black, just so that it reads better. And then when you unclick off it, you'll see that that is now black. So we're going to create the mobile layout for this. And the first thing we're going to do is move over. On the right-hand side, you have your page visuals. And these are all the different things that you can put on this page. So we're going to move over Market Analysis. And again, this just kind of shows you some of the different options that you have. We're going to make this a little bit wider so that we can then have our space between market and analysis. Then we're going to move the market share a little bit down, the growth by manufacturer down. You can scroll down on the right-hand side, and we're going to bring in the revenue by year. And we're going to stretch this all the way across. And then the final thing we're going to do is bring in the map, and we're going to make the map a little bit wider. And then we're also going to go further down so that somebody on a mobile device can see the map. So again, when you're doing data visualizations, kind of get the basic layout how you want it, and then start to work on the details. Now, Power BI Service and even Power BI Desktop have changed a lot over the last couple of years. So we're going to be going into Power BI Service, and we are going to create a new workspace. So if you have a Power BI license, you have access to Power BI Service. If you've did labs 1 and 2 and 3 and want to follow along, maybe still considering getting a Power BI license, that is the best way to kind of watch the Dashboard in a Day, see if you need it. So now you go to Workspaces, and we'll go to that next before we actually publish our. And you do want to save your changes, so we will save the changes. And then the only other thing we're going to do is unclick on the mobile layout, and that gets you back to the normal layout. And so now we have that saved, and we're going to go next to Power BI Service. Then we'll come back to our mobile layout and publish this dashboard. We are now in Power BI. The workspace section is where we're going to go next. So you have all of your different options in Power BI services, and the workspaces, we're going to create a new workspace, and we're going to call this Dashboard in a Day, and we're going to add the logo. So one of the things Power BI service allows you to is have logos for your. Here is the Van Arsdale logo. And what we're going to do here is, the Dashboard in a Day materials haven't been updated in the last couple of years. And so some of the workspace changes are not as up to date in the materials if you're following along from the materials, but at least it does show you. So now we have a Dashboard in a Day, and there's nothing inside that file. So we're going to go back to our Power BI desktop, and now we're going to publish our Dashboard in a Day file over to this workspace. Back in Power BI Desktop, and we now are in the View menu. If we go back to the Home menu, on the right-hand side, you see Publish, and that is how you publish a report to the Power BI service. So when we hit Publish, you want to make sure to save your changes, and then you publish, and it says, do you want to save your changes? Hit Save, because we made that mobile view. And now we're going to select the destination that we want it to in Power BI service. So we are going to go to the dashboard in a day. And that is what we want for. And now it's going to start publishing to Power BI. And when it gets done, you're going to see a little success metric come up. That means that it's been republished to Power BI. Now, the name of this report is DIAD Final Report, CJ, and that means that's the report we're going to look for in our Digital in a Day dashboard. And remember, you can have multiple workspaces. You may want to have a marketing workspace. You may want to have a sales workspace. You may want to have a workspace for your different parts of the company or for different people. We're going to talk about that more later on, but now it has successfully published to Power BI. So now we're going to go back to Power BI service and take a look at how that published. We've published the dashboard from Power BI Desktop to the Power BI service, and inside that workspace, Dashboard in a Day, that we created, and that is where we sent the file to, you have a report and you have a data set. And it's always important to start to get some of the terminology in Power BI service. You have reports, you have dashboards, you have data sets. And first thing we're going to do is go to the final report. This is the report. And if you double click on that, that is going to open up the actual final file that we ended up with in Power BI Desktop. So now we're going to go over some of the different visualizations you can do. When you go to the map and click on the drill down, you can now start to see some of the different visualizations. So if you click on Australia, now you'll go inside Australia and see the different states. So we can start by pinning visuals now to the dashboard. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the Van Asdale market share, which is 55.98%. And you see this little pin icon. And if you pin this visual, we're going to make a new dashboard called Dashboard in a Day. And that is where we are going to pin it. So we had a dashboard in Power BI Desktop. Now we have a dashboard in Power BI Service. So that is the first thing that we pin. And you see this thing, we could create a mobile layout and a go-to dashboard. We'll go there in just a moment. And so that is, now we've created that initial dashboard. So when we go back to the workspace, Dashboard in a Day, we've now got a dashboard, a report, and a data set. So if we go to this dashboard, we see that item that we just pinned to that page. We've successfully pinned our first visual into the new dashboard we created called DIAD, Dashboard in a Day. And if you go back to that workspace, now you see the dashboard, the report, and the data set. So we're going to go back to the report, and we want to pin some additional visuals. So this time around, percentage growth by manufacturer, we're going to pin that one. And it says, which dashboard do you want it to go to? An existing dashboard. And then you can select which dashboard you want it to go to. So we want it to go to the DIAD, Dashboard in a Day dashboard. So that has now pinned. You'll see the little pinned dashboard icon. This is a shortcut to go to that dashboard. We're going to add an additional pin before we go there. Now we're going to add the revenue by year and manufacturer, and we are going to pin that to the dashboard, and we're going to send it to the dashboard in a day. So those are some of the different things that you can do with pinning, and the notification boxes kind of come up and help you out. And then the final one we're going to do now is, if we go to the by manufacturer page, we are going to pin the gauge. So you've got different pages of the report, but maybe you're making a high-level report for somebody who doesn't need to see all of these visuals. So you're scaling back on the visuals, and then you're making a detailed report. So we're going to add the gauge to the dashboard in a day. And now we have, let's go back to dashboard in a day workspace. And then if we go to the dashboard, we now have these 4 visuals inside the dashboard in a day dashboard. Let's start to adjust some of these tiles in the dashboard. And what it allows you to do is you can move these tiles and you can resize the tiles into the dashboard. So we are going to make this a little bit bigger. Actually, we'll make that a little bit smaller. Then we'll move this up. This one is going to be made bigger. We'll move it to the left. And then for this final one, we're going to move this down. Now we're going to add a tile. If you go to the edit button and go add a tile, and then click image, then click next. In the dashboard in a day, there is a link for the tile, and you see that tile appear. It's a Van Arsdale tile. You now click apply. Now we have the logo for the Van Arsdale, and we're going to move that to the upper left. So we're going to move these around again to, this is going to be the right side. We'll move this down. And you can move these tiles and resize them, and you'll probably do it multiple times as you're creating your dashboard. Again, the best way is probably to get everything kind of into the dashboard that you're initially thinking for your pins. Then you can start to resize and reshape your different. So now we've got revenue by year, and we're going to stop with these adjustments for now, and we're going to take a look at this dashboard. Next, we're going to edit one of the tiles. When you click on the tiles and right-click on the ellipsis, you have different options. You can chat in Teams, you can go to report, you can open in focus mode. This time around, we're going to edit the details, and currently this is titled revenue. So we're going to change this to Van Arsdale revenue, and you notice the revenue, and once we hit apply, the title on the dashboard changes. So those are just some of the options that you can do with some of the tile options. And again, there's quite a few of those. We won't be going through all of those, but we will be going through some of these here in Lab 4. Another feature in Power BI service in the dashboard section is you'll want to use the Ask a Question feature. So at the top of the dashboard, you'll see Ask a Question about your data. And we are going to click on that, and we're going to type in Van Arsdale market share by country as a tree map. And this is what you'll get for the answer, and it shows Germany as the top one. Now, this is your visual, and if you want to actually use that visual, you can then pin it. So we want that, and we will pin it into the Digital in a Day dashboard. The next feature we're going to look at is the View Insights feature. If you select the Van Arsdale revenue tile and click on the View Insights, the insights will start to appear on the right-hand side. And again, you can pin some of these insights to the dashboard. So if we want to if we think that this is a valid insight and something we want to keep track of, we pin that to the dashboard in a day. And then another thing you can do is use the focus mode. So we're going to show you how to use the focus mode. We're going to exit the focus mode here. You can open in focus mode. And this will show you a little bit bigger visual so that you can take a look at this also on some of the different options. Again, dashboard in a day is designed to show you all of the different Dashboard in a day, again, is designed to show you some of the different possibilities. This is really a beginner's type dashboard, and if you're thinking of using Power BI and getting a pro license, that is probably the best way to use dashboard in a day. The next feature is showing you how to set up an alert. If you select on the Van Arsdale market share and you see your different options, one of them is to manage alerts. And the manage alert screen will come on, and you can add an alert rule. And then what you do is you name the alert title, and we're going to keep it as Van Arsdale market share. And this is where you set your thresholds. So you can set your frequency of the alert, the threshold. You can have it be an above a threshold. You can have it be a below, and maximum notification frequency, most every 24 hours, at most once an hour. And then you can have it send an email to the post. So those are different things you can save and close. And that is just another feature of Power BI dashboard in a day. So as you start to learn some of the different options in dashboard, the next thing you can do is what's called you have some of the different file options. You can manage your permissions. You can also have some of your different settings. And really, those are some of the different options inside Power BI. So that is Lab 4. We showed you how to create a dashboard, publish to the Power BI service, showed you some of the different managing of alerts. You can add a tile. You can ask a question and then pin that to the dashboard. Remember, when you create, you can create multiple dashboards, and you have a data set, a report, and a dashboard. And the dashboard, you can then set up some of your different pins and tiles. Don't forget, we've got labs 1, 2, and 3. You can find those on the channel. And we still have lab number 5 for Power BI Dashboard in a Day 2023. Okay, lab number 5, we start off with the collaboration and distribution on Power BI service. We're going to go back to Power BI service, and remember, this is only available if you have a pro license. And what we're going to do is manage access. At the top of your digital in a dashboard day workspace, you have manage access. And some of the different types of people that you can add for members or groups, you just add in their email address, and you have different types of access that you can grant. You can grant contributor access. They can add, edit, delete content within the workspace. A member access can do everything that a contributor can do, plus they can reshare, publish, and update apps. So if you want to have other people contributing and collaborating on your Power BI dashboard, you'd want those. The administrator is both everything that a member can do, and then they can also change and delete workspaces. So the admin has the authority over the members and the contributors. And then you have viewers. Viewers can just view and interact with the dashboard and work in the Power BI for access. So those are some of the different levels of access. There's 4 different levels, and you can also add people to that by hitting the Add People button on the right-hand side, as you can see. So you can also do some sharing of your reports and dashboards, and we're going to show you how to do that. When you do sharing, you can also include them on the workspace. So we're going to show you how to do some sharing next. The first thing you'll see is the included in the app. That is the feature that allows you, if you have reports and dashboards included in your workspace that you do not want to share with viewers, then you will exclude those items. So one of the things you're going to want to do at the top of your dashboard in a day, you're going to want to hit the Create App button. And this will allow you to build your app. You can name your app. And then the next thing you're going to want to do after you build a description is hit the Add Content button. So let's say DIAD Demo for Access Lab 5. And now you hit the Add Content button. And that is when you're ready to add content to your dashboard in Power BI service. And now you can start to add some of the different content. Let's say if we want to add the report, that's how you would add that. And now you have that in the app. And now you can add the audience. So the audience allows you to customize your audience and determine who can see that. So customizing your audiences. Audiences are the people who can access your app. They can create multiple audiences, and you can also show or hide different content based on each of those audiences. So then you'll go through. Now you can also create a new audience. And then the next thing you're going to want to do, if you have users or groups in your organization or your entire organization. Now, you're never usually going to use the entire organization button. Where you have your specific users or groups is where you're going to add them there. And then you would go to publishing your app. And you would just hit publish, and that would start to publish your apps. So that is how to publish the app. And you can copy the link and then send that to people to let them know that the app has been published. And you can also go to the app and it will show that one report that we have in there, Digital Dashboard in a Day. So there's a lot of terminology in Power BI service, but one of the advantages of using it as an organization is that you could have a sales department, you could have a marketing department, you could have a finance department, you could have managers that have access to certain reports. By setting up your bookmarks that we talked about or drill down levels in your reports, you can set that up. And then the next thing you can do is if you want to install the Power BI app on your phone, you can do that as well. And then you would log in and see your phone app. So those are some of the options that are available with Power BI Dashboard in a Day. And you can see those different dashboards that you set up. And you also have your Power Apps. Now remember, the ecosystem for Power BI and apps does include some of the different Power Apps. You got Power Pages, you've got Power Automate, and in the last year they've started to add some of the Data Hub and some of the other workflows. So that is a look at Power BI Dashboard in a Day, lab number 5. And we're going to close it out with some final thoughts on Dashboard in a Day and some of the next steps in your Power BI journey. Power BI Dashboard in a Day 2023. That is a look at lab number 5. And one of the things in your Power BI journey, when I started, I went to Dashboard in a Day and really learned a lot. I had kind of experimented with started off with a few books and then watched a couple of YouTube videos, and really Dashboard in a Day kind of put it all together because you imported the data. And even though the data is a couple of years old now, it's still a good resource to really learn Power BI, to learn some of the different things that you can do with Power BI service, the mobile app, and also with transforming data in Power Query. So that is a look at Dashboard in a Day for 2023. Again, look for the description below for the link to the Dashboard in a Day materials. And we've got other videos on the channel as you start to learn your Power BI journey. We're going to do some more videos on Power Query and importing data as we continue to learn Power BI and trying to solve business questions.